Have you ever been in a new situation and you've looked around and thought, wow, I didn't expect this? Or have you been around another person and you found yourself very surprised because their behavior was not something you anticipated at all? Or have you ever wondered, people seem to expect me to do something and I don't know what it is? The way we expect other people to do things or the expectations we have for other places or situations can be problematic. Today we're talking about that on This Life.
Speaking of expectations, this last Sunday, Gordon and I were cooking, as we always do, for Sunday breakfast. And we almost always have potatoes, fried potatoes, and we add carrots and peppers and all kinds of things to it. Anyway, we got all finished cooking, ready to eat. We took the first bite, and then we looked at each other, and we both said together, "This needs salt." Now, the funny thing about that was I had expected that he would add the salt, and he had expected that I would add the salt. But what happened next was even a little bit stranger. Is he did this, and then I did this, and then he, and then I. We looked like pop-up puppets or something, because we each thought the other might get up and get the salt.
Wow. Mine is around cooking. Last week, our son was a little sad. It was time for dinner, and his dad had said, well, we're going to make pasta. And he says, like, I don't want pasta. I said, well, we want to make something else. I don't want that. And I said, well, would you like some dumplings? He said, yes, Mommy, the squishy kind. And I was like, okay, I'll make you some dumplings. And so I busied myself making the dumplings, made some soup, dropped them in the pot. They were cooking, and he said, Mommy, can I look in the pot? And I was like, okay. So he comes in, climbs on the chair, very excited for the squishy dumplings, looks in the pot and goes, Mommy, they're the wrong color. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, they're not gray. I was like, they're never gray. Yes, they are gray. And I was so devastated because I'd never seen gray dumplings before. They were always
never heard of gray dumplings.
I never seen them before. But he was sad, and I had to tell him, honey, just wait until you taste them, and just, let's see if they taste
like
the same way.
Gray one.
So he was set on that.
He was set on gray, squishy dumplings in the pot. But the good news was that he ate them anyway.
Oh, that is good news.
So something quite hilarious happened to me this morning. It would have been even funnier if it hadn't happened at 3:30 in the morning, but we are renovating in our house, and we moved the furniture around in our bedroom. And so when our puppies cried in the middle of the night, I got up out of the right side of the bed and ran smack into the wall because the door was supposed to be there, and it wasn't. So I'm feeling a little beaten up today.
Oh, no. Well, I want to share with you all a case study for our conversation this afternoon. John, a young man from Oklahoma, falls in love with Jennifer, a young woman from California whom he has met in college. They have many of the same religious values and are amazed at all the things they enjoy doing together.
We're very fortunate.
Yes, they are.
Coming from Oklahoma and California.
After getting married, John is somewhat surprised by the fact that Jennifer invites him to help her clean the house. But he
invites him.
Yeah, she invites him. Before long, John verbalizes his distaste of cleaning to Jennifer and suggests he would rather take care of the yard since that is his role anyway. Jennifer responds with, what do you mean it's your role?
Oh, so we're talking about gender role expectations here. What you expect somebody else to do, if they're male or female,
to do.
And what you expect and what you expect you'll never have to do.
That's right. So what is going on, and what kind of things can make this situation better or much worse?
John should have married someone from Oklahoma.
Well, now, wait a minute. I think that's a slur against... No, I don't think that's necessarily true, because people are different no matter who and where.
No matter where they come from. What's interesting here is they had so many things in common, but they didn't seem to have talked about role expectations.
Well, who does? See, if you have the expectations, you don't think to talk about them.
Isn't that what expectations are, though? Unverbalized desires that we want from the other person, the relationship. And then when they're not met, we don't know what to do with it. Not realizing we didn't actually say what it was that we were looking for.
Well, and not to go too far afield from the case, but we have all kinds of expectations. You know, the expectation that there will be a tomorrow,
Yeah.
the expectation that we'll have our jobs, the
That we'll be well.
that we'll be well, that we'll be happy, that our needs will be taken. I mean, it just goes on and on.
One of the things that came to my mind when you're reading this, Dilys, is that as a couple counselor, when people come to me for premarital counseling, you look at what are the expectations, because if you don't get what you expect, you get angry at the other person. If you're typically not just pleasantly surprised to find out that your loved one doesn't want to do the dishes or doesn't want to help when you invite them to help you with the housework. And if you have a hope that they want to help you out and then they don't do it, then you're just disappointed. But if you expect them to do it, then you're furious because some law was broken somehow.
Well, and it's hard sometimes too, because people talk about these things, but the words don't mean the same. I remember once asking a couple, how much debt should you have on a credit card? And they both said none. And something caused me to ask, well, how much is none? And one of them said, well, none is something less than $2,000. And the other one said, that's none?
Wow. Well, what would make this worse, I think, would be for them not to define and discuss what roles are, what their roles are. You know, if they don't really just spend some time thinking about, well, what do you mean? What do you think your role is as a husband?
Now, would you say that, though, Dilys, right when she invites him to clean?
Right.
Is that when they have the discussion?
No, that would not be a good time to have the conversation. I don't think, because then they wouldn't clean, and they might end up getting into a discussion that leads to some anger, and they might end up walking away. And
so we're talking about having a conversation at a neutral time.
Yes.
When we're not faced with, I don't like that word, invite to clean. I have never invited my husband to clean. I don't know too many people that invite their spouse to clean. They say, hey, would you do this?
That's right.
Isn't that an invitation?
No.
Not really.
No, not really. And what's interesting
Because
about...
you can't decline
this
it.
is interesting. Are you serious? So when you ask your husband to clean, it means he must?
Well, if he asked me to do something, I think I would understand that it really needs to be done, but there's no invitation. You can decline an invitation with no ill will.
Now, the thing about it is, I have been learning how to invite as opposed to telling and commanding, because I've been nicely reminded that no one likes to be told what to do, especially my spouse.
Well, I mean, we're talking about, invite and telling what, telling each other what to do and inviting are just way at the opposite end. So something in the middle of saying, hey, would you mind? Okay, so I've made peace with the fact that it says invite. Let's move on.
That's interesting, and maybe we're actually defining what an expectation is. An expectation is where you don't expect to have to invite. You expect it to be yes.
Right.
You don't expect the person to say no. Maybe that's part of what defines an expectation, and maybe it isn't an invitation. If we're talking about expectations, it's a expecting.
And then the other piece of this, I think, they're newlyweds, so they may, some of the things that they can actually do is, in the neutral space and time, having a conversation about this, is then talk about what happens if I don't meet that expectation. Because oftentimes, women say, well, I've already said it to you. I shouldn't have to say it to you again. While the male usually goes, well, you didn't say it to me, so I didn't think I needed to. You know, and so on and so forth, and that creates even more problems with the expectation.
Or the expectation, if you loved me, you would do this,
right.
You would bring me flowers, you would send me notes. Am I hitting some...
Well, here's one. I mean, I grew up in a house where my dad, every weekend, Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday lunch, Saturday evening, and Sunday morning, he washed the dishes. And that we didn't have dishwasher back then. And so he washed the dishes. And so my expectation would be that whoever I marry is going to help clean up. And he does, I'm happy to say. But, you know, when you come from a certain way of life, you have a certain expectation of what's going to be done in the future as it pertains to you. So I like your idea, especially Dilys, of them sitting down and saying, you know, where do you come from and how are things done, and what did you think of it? Is that what you want to continue? Or are there parts of it you didn't like? Or the parts of it you liked? How do you want me to fit into that? Or do we need to renegotiate that?
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens when an expectation is not met. What happens inside a person? Because I'm thinking, Jennifer, she hasn't even thought about the idea that he may not want to help her or not be able to help her. What happens when John says, you know, this just isn't my thing. I'm going outside to mow the lawn. What happens to her?
Sometimes I think resentment can come in.
Yeah.
And if resentment festers itself long enough, then it leads into the anger and the sense of being wronged. You know, she may take it personally and saying, I can't believe that you won't do this and you won't help me here. And that it's, you know, and then it becomes something that overshadows the love and prevents them from even remembering why. This becomes the spark that started an argument or brings distance between them, and they won't even remember that this is what started it, because it goes even further.
They might not even remember that they ever loved each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and as you're talking, Dilys, I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of women view request within the context of the relationship. And maybe to men it's not exactly that way, it's just a request.
Yes.
And it doesn't, it's separate from whether I love you or not.
Oh, so to say no is like just
It's like, will you do this? No.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
It's nothing personal.
Yeah.
I have a friend
I don't
who-
know if that's true, but I wonder.
I have a friend who said years ago, when we were talking about in relationships and expectations between husbands and wives, and he made the statement once. He said, we were like, well, how do you know what makes your wife happy? He says, I don't know. The list changes every week. You know, the expectation changes that was what he was trying to say. I don't know what she wants. He says, me, I'm really simple. These are the only two things that I really require.
Oh,
And
what were they? Do you remember? Oh, you don't want to say?
No, not really. But the point he was making was, my list is really, really short. You know, however, with my spouse, I know, and over time he had learned the list could change. You know, and as we were talking about males and females and how we actually approach that, he has had to learn when she expresses an expectation, if it's going to be something that's going to really deeply hurt her, or can she take the fact that his no is not a personal insult or affront to her being his wife, but just a no.
Well, and let's take this in a little different direction here. Let's say that John is from a family of 5 boys and no sisters. And maybe he didn't get the experience of having conversations with women more to understand what women expect or what a female perspective on things would be. Because your mom is your mom, you kind of obey and adore. But, you know, I think that there are times when if you don't have that experience, it's really hard to know what to expect. So he might even feel put upon to say, what? I'm supposed to do what?
Dishes? Me?
Why are you mad? I was very clear I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do it.
Well, and we're talking a lot about spouses here because of John and Jennifer, but I was thinking the expectation that we have like at a store, a grocery store, a department store, that someone's going to be kind. I remember once someone was unkind to me. I was simply looking for a dress and she was like, you know what, I just don't have time. You'll have to get it yourself. And I was like, oh,
great customer service.
And then I realized, you know, I just expect
That's right.
that she's going to be nice to me, or I expect that this person is going to give me back the correct change.
Right.
And then when someone doesn't, or they charge me double or something odd, I'm like, what? How can this be possible? And yet it happens all the time.
Or you expect moms to keep their kids quiet in church, or here's an expectation. If I'm in church and there's music playing and someone's behind me, pss, 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 I just could scream.
Oh, and I have been that person.
I can't take it. I mean, in New York where I grew up, if you whisper and you're in a concert hall, everyone wheels around and they glare at you for the slightest rustling. And so for me, it's just built in from years and years of going to concerts with my family. And so when I'm in church and, you know, the organ is playing loud, the people behind me think they can talk loud, or if there's an orchestra playing and they're in a really impassioned time, people talk louder behind me, I just want to turn around and glare and say, don't you know where we are?
Well, I'm going to tell you an expectation that clashes with that one.
Okay.
And that is to be at a concert near the end when it's coming, or in a church, and someone turns and says, hi, my name is so-and-so, what's your name? And then you end up talking when you don't want to talk.
Oh, sure.
And people glaring
Glare
back.
at you. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go back to what we're talking about, what happens if the expectation is not met. And we talked about the resentment. Another thing that also might happen is the person who does not have their expectations met begins to question and doubt themselves.
Yes.
And then they begin to you know, doubt comes in, worry comes in this sense of, it's me. It's, you know, it's he doesn't love me enough, or something that I didn't
Maybe
right.
I shouldn't
Maybe
need
I shouldn't
this,
need this.
want
You know,
this.
and that's not it either. It's you say what the expectation is. If the person can or cannot meet it, not to take it personally, but to look at it for what it is. Just an
I want
expectation.
to sit on that just a little bit, because I think a lot of people struggle right there. Is if another person isn't meeting their expectation, they begin to wish they didn't need it because it's so painful. And then you try and try to stop needing it, and then you come to a place where you just want to explode because you do need it.
That sounds so familiar. And before we started today, I was sharing with Carla that I was on a committee once, and someone said, I didn't say anything, I had nothing to contribute. And this man in the committee said, very angrily, "You need to speak up more. People expect a lot more of you than that."
Wow.
And I thought, what am I supposed to do then? What do I say? Do I generate something? I quit the committee. Because I didn't know what his expectations were. He was angry, and I thought, well, that's really odd. I think now that I'm a therapist, I think that's all about him.
Right.
But I didn't know that when I was 23, you know.
Right.
And so I think people do throw their hands in the air when they can't meet some kind of expectation, and I think parents do that to kids a lot
All the
too.
time. Yeah. All the time.
Unwittingly, but that's
An
another thing
expectation.
that happens.
And it's hard to change your expectations because, like you said, Barbara, you know, early on, you grow up a certain way. You have siblings that are of a different gender, or you don't, or you have two parents, or you don't. You develop all these expectations, and it's hard to change your expectations. You know, for Jennifer, John says doesn't want to do the dishes. Well, what does she do if she's like you, Barbara, having grown up with a man that did the dishes, and that doing of dishes tells her she's loved? What has she, you know, how does she change that, or does she? Does she try to change him or her expectation?
You know, the longer I live, the more I believe that it's what we think things mean that really makes a difference. And if we don't share what we think things mean, then we create a story about how horrible other people are when they don't meet our expectations.
Absolutely.
And so if there can be a conversation with, with the other individuals that it means so much to me when you do this. And what it means is it ties into this memory or this recollection, gives me a great feeling, I feel really loved. And when somebody understands it, that's how they make you feel, and that's what it means to you. I mean, they might say, well, I'm not doing that, but they might also say, yeah, I want to do more of that, because that's something she really likes.
And I think it's okay to, as long as you're talking about it. I think for me the biggest struggle is to not say something. Speak up. Share what your expectations are, and give that person room to either meet the expectation or not meet it.
Or to renegotiate something entirely different that means something else.
I want to bring up
great.
a type of expectation that is maybe too big to bring up here, but it happens I see it in both religious and non-religious people near the end of life when they will make a comment of this sort. I thought if I had lived a healthy life, this wouldn't happen. Or I thought if I had been a good person, paid my, you know, given money to charities and all these things, that this illness wouldn't happen to me. I thought if I didn't smoke, I wouldn't get lung cancer. Those kinds of, this expectations that are kind of a tit for tat. If I do this, I didn't think that that would, if I thought if I dated for 3 years, I wouldn't marry a man that was abusive. You know, all those sort of large expectations in life that somehow life or God has been unjust.
That's the whole point of Rabbi Kushner's book, isn't it? When bad things happen to good people.
To good people, yeah. Well, that
was a stopping point. Wasn't it?
We didn't expect that all of us would
I
take
didn't expect that. I was just thinking about this.
well, this is a good point to move on to email questions. Because I think what happened right there is we arrived at a place that's hard to respond to.
It is.
When expectations get so big and we're so devastated. Okay.
Well, take my breath away.
Okay, I have an email question that was written in. I have been a social worker for almost 20 years. My problem is that my family thinks that if anything goes wrong with any relative, that I should drop everything and provide counseling, give referrals, and in general, fix the family. I'm sick of feeling like I'm letting them down when I say no, but I have a life too. Am I wrong about this? Now, I'm not sure what the this is because there's several things in there.
Well, no, I don't think that person is wrong for feeling like they have a life too. You know, they have a right to say, no, I can't solve every problem. You know, they can listen, but they don't have to feel that they have to solve every problem.
I think that a lot of families sacrifice to send their kids to school, to higher education, to become therapists of some
Yes.
sort or another, and then they think it's due them
Yes.
to get some benefit of that. And I think it happens in all mental health disciplines.
Or
And-
medical disciplines.
Or medical,
Yeah,
you know, you meet someone
Yeah.
outside church and they say, you know, I got this little mole right here. You want to take a look at that?
And you can say, I'm an anesthetist, and they don't care.
No. So I think there is an expectation that if you have something, you're going to want to share it. The other expectation is that the state has, that you don't do therapy with your family members.
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
against the law.
That's
And a lot of people don't realize that.
But I think also she might have incurred this a bit because she says they think I should drop everything and provide counseling. And I'm wondering, has she been doing
In the
that to
past.
create that expectation? Yeah.
That's
Sometimes we do things, create an expectation, then we're frustrated when they expect it.
Well, and it
That's right.
feels good to have. We almost expect people to want to know our opinion, though, when we're in this role. And so if they don't want it, or they are,
It's like,
they're
why don't they
maintaining-
value-
Yes,
yeah.
when they're maintaining their
Yeah.
boundaries, it feels a little off.
Yeah.
I have another question. I can't seem to make my wife happy.
Oh, that's unusual.
Ever since we got married, she has been mad at me for not being like someone else that she thinks I should be like. I'm frustrated and she's angry at me. Help!
So I guess, again, it's what did he expect? What was his expectation about keeping a wife happy? There's a whole
Wow, I know.
There's a whole bunch of stuff behind
Well,
that.
and that my question was, I mean, there's so many questions, Dilys. At each part, I was like,
Right.
okay, there's the. But the first, what did he say first?
He says I can't seem to make my wife happy.
Right there, right there.
Is it his expectation that he has to do that?
to?
That's not
I
up
mean,
to him
who
to
gave
do.
him that burden?
That's right.
What a horrible burden
That's
to
a
have.
horrible burden.
And then what was the second part?
Ever since we got married, she's been mad at me for not being like someone else that she thinks I should be like,
So there's the expectation.
That's
Right.
expectation.
And who is that someone else?
because that's who she should have married.
Unless it's her father.
That's her father.
Father
That
or
would be good.
brother or,
or
someone just
someone
like
else.
that.
So he's frustrated and she's angry.
Again, that's a really good time to trot out those expectations and talk about what
Sit
they
down
are.
and
But
talk
that's
it through.
hard, you know. Isn't it difficult to say to a person, I thought you would be like my father? You know, it's hard to state what those expectations are.
Well, once you say it, it's on the table,
on
and
the
you
table.
can say, well, that was really not that clever, or you can move on to negotiate something else.
And something
is hard.
just struck me about that. One of the challenges with the person, for instance, he in this situation is the one that's frustrated and doesn't know what to do is, I'm thinking he may even be struggling with what he thinks her answer is going to be
Sure.
if he even starts the conversation.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, so it also puts a roadblock to bringing change and the necessary conversations that happen because you're thinking, well, I already expect her to answer me this
Sure.
way
Right, of
if I
course.
say this.
Sure.
When the truth is, just do it.
Just
do
Just
it.
start
Have
having
the
the conversations.
conversation.
Just talk
Yeah.
it through.
Here's one. I like this one. Is it too much to expect my daughter to express gratitude for all that I do for her?
Yes, it is.
She has it so much better than I ever did, and it really bugs me that I do so much for her that goes unnoticed.
Oh, you
What
know,
parent do you know that gets recognition and gratitude
That's
for all
right.
they do?
It's that walking in the snow. I walk 2 miles a day in the snow, and
But wait a minute here.
Sacrifice from my-
Some parents have a very unfortunate beginning, and they vow to themselves, I'm going to give my kids what I didn't have. And therefore, when they give their kids what they didn't have, they anticipate that their child will be so relieved that they don't have what their parents had. But the kids don't know what
They
their
don't have the
parents had,
history.
so they can't appreciate fully.
no.
And I think this is actually where some of that frustration comes from. Because the kids expect their parents to just do and give, and the parents are upset.
And then at some point, the child goes, well, if you didn't, this is what you're supposed to do, right? As my
Right,
mom.
right.
So why are you upset about that? And I think it's inherent in all of us to teach each other and model for each other how to just be thankful.
or, well, the other thing is, I mean, we talk about that side changing. I mean, it could be that a person states what their expectations are.
Yes.
You know, if a parent says, I wish just once, you could let me know that you get what I'm doing for you. Then a child might say, oh, I didn't know you didn't know. You know, I can try.
Well, I would say just once or twice, because if a child feels obliged
That's right.
to always thank their parents, then they are always in their debt, and
Right.
nothing is for free.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I have one more question. I promised my husband that I would make curtains for the living room. I thought it wouldn't be hard, just sewing straight lines, but I botched them up and now I have to throw them away. The loss was
familiar.
about $150. My husband was fine that I couldn't do it, but I'm devastated that I failed at this. It's really gotten me down, and I don't know why.
Oh, she thinks she can do everything.
Or doesn't want to lose the
Maybe
money.
I can speak from experience here.
Let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if the husband is okay with it, then don't carry that burden. It's all right.
That's a lot of money.
Or redo it. If you can't let it go, take the seam out and redo it. So, I mean, that's a fine line to say, well, just let it go. Maybe she can't. But she's got to decide which she's going to do and then go with it.
But this is about expectations that we have of ourselves. We expect ourselves to be perfect, right? Or we expect
Yes.
ourselves to be able to do everything we set our hands to do.
I'll never forget the time a voice teacher told me that she didn't think I should pursue singing. It was the one thing I wanted. You know, it's hard to let
It's
a
hard.
dream
Yeah,
go,
it is.
a vision of yourself.
But the relief comes when you realize, you know what, I'm still a great person. This does not diminish who I am and what I'm able to do. I'm just not good at this. Put it down today and try for another day, you know.
So what are some points about how to deal with expectations?
Talk about them.
Talk
Be
about
clear.
them.
Be clear. And give the other person room to renegotiate the expectations. Don't be so hard and fast about them.
Don't be so hard on others, knowing that they may not have the same expectations.
And think hard about whether it's realistic to maintain your expectations.
Even looking at your theology around God, around life, your philosophy around all these things.
Why things happen.
Why do you expect? Why do we expect what we expect from people,
Right.
work? What?
Those are really good.
Those are really good. Those are really good
Are you
points.
laughing because it sounds difficult?
It is a challenge.
It is a challenge. It's a
Yes.
real challenge.
But with God, all things are possible.
With people who are listening, all things are possible. Looks like our time is up. That's all we have. Thank you for joining us on This Life.